Welcome to Motion Deep Dive. Unravel the magic behind the screen.
All right, so are you ready for another deep dive?
Always ready.
Great, because today we're taking a look at Don't Move, this new Netflix thriller.
Oh, yeah, I saw that one.
Yeah. So basically we're trying to figure out, is this like a hidden gem or is it a total flop?
Yeah, I'm curious.
Let's find out.
Okay, so what really jumped out at me was how the film tackles this whole idea of, like, saving someone.
Okay.
The movie starts with Iris, who's our main character, and she's about to jump off a cliff.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and it's the same cliff where her son died.
Oh, geez.
Yeah, she's clearly, like, in deep grief and ready to end it all.
That's heavy.
Yeah, and then this guy, Richard, shows up.
Okay, so he talks her down, right? Like a good Samaritan?
Well, sort of. He stops her from jumping, but then he abducts her.
Oh, no.
Yeah, and he injects her with this paralytic agent.
What? So he like saves her life just to take away her ability to like move or speak?
Pretty much, it's a really messed up kind of help.
Yeah, that's dark.
Yeah.
And this is where the reviewers really start going back and forth. They felt like the movie didn't quite live up to its potential. They said the script was unremarkable and they wished it had gone deeper into like the characters' heads.
Yeah, I can see that.
Yeah.
I think this kind of points to like a bigger issue we see with thrillers sometimes.
Okay.
Like when a movie relies too much on a plot device, like this paralytic agent, it can overshadow the character development.
Right.
We get so caught up in like what's going to happen next.
Yeah.
That we don't really get to connect with the why behind like why the characters are doing what they're doing.
That's true because the tension's kind of built into the situation, right? She's paralyzed, he's a creep, we know something bad's gonna happen.
Exactly.
But what would make it really interesting is understanding why these characters are the way they are.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And this seems to be where Don't Move really divides viewers. Some critics pointed out some plot contrivances that felt a bit too convenient.
Oh, really?
Yeah, like Richard's supposed to be this mastermind.
Right.
But he makes some pretty dumb mistakes that let Iris escape.
Yeah, I noticed that too. Like a few of those scenes, I was kind of rolling my eyes. Yeah. Like he's a serial killer, but he doesn't bother to check her pockets for a weapon. Like,
right.
Come on.
It's like they wanted to give her a fighting chance, but it just makes Richard look less believable as a threat.
Yeah, it kind of undermines the tension because you start to question his competence.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But here's the interesting thing.
Okay.
Even the critics who didn't like the plot generally praised Kelsey Esbill's performance as Iris.
Like imagine trying to act terrified when you can barely move a muscle.
Right.
Like her breathing and her eyes.
Yeah.
To show Iris's terror and her gradual shift from like wanting to die to fighting for her life.
And that internal journey is so important. Like the movie isn't just about a woman trying to escape.
Right.
It's about how facing death, first by her own choice and then forced upon her by Richard, reawakens her will to live.
That's deep.
Yeah, and the paralytic agent becomes this metaphor for the emotional paralysis she's feeling because of her grief.
So she's literally and figuratively frozen at the beginning.
Exactly.
Wow.
And then as the drug starts to wear off, she's not just regaining movement, but she's also breaking free from the grief that was holding her back.
That's a really interesting connection.
Yeah, it is.
Okay, so we've got Iris battling for survival, but then there's Richard, this seemingly charming guy who's actually a serial killer.
Right.
What's his deal?
Yeah, it's a good question. Like, what kind of person gets off on paralyzing and killing people?
Exactly.
And apparently he was just going through life feeling completely disconnected until he witnessed his girlfriend's death in a car accident.
Oh, wow.
And that's where his logic gets really disturbing.
How so?
He claims that seeing her die gave him this sense of clarity and connection.
Really?
Yeah, he even goes as far as to say, I didn't feel God that night. I was God.
Whoa, okay.
Talk about a twisted worldview.
Yeah, that's intense. So he finds meaning and purpose in death, but only through inflicting it on others.
Exactly.
That's chilling. So we've got Iris, who starts the movie wanting to die and ends up fighting like hell to live. And then we've got Richard, who seems totally ordinary, but is actually driven by this twisted sense of purpose he finds in death.
Yeah.
And they're both thrown together in this isolated, menacing setting, Big Sur State Park.
Yeah, the setting is crucial.
Oh, absolutely.
It's not just a random location.
Right.
The vastness of the woods, the towering trees, the rushing rivers, it all adds to this feeling of unease and entrapment.
Definitely.
mirrors Iris's internal struggle.
Oh, interesting.
She's physically trapped by the paralytic agent, but she's also emotionally trapped by her grief.
All right.
It's like the woods themselves are closing in on her.
Yeah, and then there's that red toy boat that keeps appearing,
Oh, right.
which belonged to Iris's son. It's like a symbol of her inability to let go of the past, this constant reminder of her loss.
Exactly. That red boat is fascinating.
Yeah.
It represents her grief, but also her connection to her son.
Mm-hmm.
It's only when she starts to fight back, to embrace her own survival, that she's separated from the boat.
Interesting.
Almost like she's finally starting to let go of the past.
Wow. Okay, so there's a lot more to unpack here than just a simple thriller plot.
Definitely.
But before we get too deep into the symbolism, I want to go back to those scenes where the tension really ramps up.
Okay.
What stood out to you?
There's that one where she's trying to unbuckle her seatbelt,
Oh, yeah.
knowing that the drug is taking hold.
Yeah.
It's all about the details, like the way her fingers fumble, the panic in her eyes. You can feel the clock ticking as she loses control of her body.
Yeah, I was on the edge of my seat during that scene.
And then there are those moments where it seems like she's about to be rescued.
Yes.
Like at the gas station when the cop pulls up next to Richard's truck. Each time hope flickers and then it's snatched away.
Oh, it's so frustrating.
I know, right?
Yeah.
Those near rescues are classic thriller elements.
Yeah,
But they work because they play on our empathy for Iris.
totally.
We want her to be safe to break free, but she's constantly thwarted by Richard's actions.
It's like watching a train wreck in slow motion.
Yeah, and then there's that final confrontation on the lake.
Yeah.
It's like she's literally being submerged in her past,
Yeah.
forced to confront everything that's happened.
That's a powerful image.
It is, isn't it?
Yeah.
She goes under the water, almost drowning, and then emerges reborn in a sense.
Wow.
No longer the grieving mother, but a survivor.
Okay, so this movie is definitely playing with some deep themes here.
It is.
But before we dive into those, there's one thing I have to ask about the paralytic agent itself.
Okay.
Is there any real-world basis for something like that?
That's where it gets tricky.
How so?
The movie never gives a specific name for the drug, and the effects are described a bit differently depending on the source.
Interesting.
Some say it takes 20 minutes to kick in and causes complete paralysis for an hour, while others describe a more gradual onset with different parts of the body going numb at different times.
So it sounds like the filmmakers took some creative liberties to set up the scenario they wanted.
Yeah, it seems that way.
But the question remains, could a drug really do that? Could it completely paralyze you while leaving your mind fully aware?
That's a really good question.
Yeah, and it's one we'll have to explore further.
Definitely.
Because while the movie uses this drug as a plot device, it does make you wonder about the science behind it.
It does.
Is it even remotely possible?
Right.
And if so, what are the ethical implications of something like that existing?
Yeah, that's a whole other can of worms.
All right, so we've established that Don't Move is more than just like your average thriller.
Right.
But those YouTube essays, they really went deep into like the symbolism and themes of the movie.
I did.
And it kind of got me thinking, like, is this movie actually trying to say something deeper?
Oh, I think it is for sure. One of the most striking themes is this idea of duality.
Okay.
It's like woven throughout the whole film, starting with the title itself.
Interesting.
Don't Move can be seen as both like a command from Richard
Uh-huh.
and also a reflection of Iris's initial state.
Right.
Like she's literally frozen by the drug, but she's also emotionally paralyzed by grief.
Yeah, it's like she's stuck in this in-between space, not alive but not dead either.
Exactly.
And then there's Richard, who's all about presenting this charming facade but hiding this dark side.
Right.
Like he even has a family who's completely clueless about what he does. Yeah.
It's crazy. Think about the visual contrast, too, like between Richard's home,
Okay.
which is bright and welcoming and seemingly normal,
Right?
and then the dark, isolated woods where he takes his victims.
Yeah.
It's like a visual representation of this duality, this split between appearances and reality.
That's a really good point. It's like the film is saying that things aren't always what they seem.
Exactly.
And this idea of deception, it extends to Iris as well.
How so?
Well, at the beginning, she's passive defeated, almost giving up on life.
Right.
But as the movie goes on, we see this other side of her emerge.
Yeah.
This fierce, resilient woman who refuses to be a victim.
Absolutely. And her physical paralysis becomes this metaphor for the emotional paralysis she's been experiencing because of her grief.
Okay, I see what you're saying.
It's not until she starts to literally break free from the drug's effects that she's able to confront her pain and reclaim her agency. Don't Move really doesn't shy away from showing like the rawness of grief,
Yeah.
the numbness, the anger, the feeling of being completely broken.
Mm-hmm.
There's this one line that really stuck with me where Iris says, "The part I hate the most is that I can't cry. I want to, but I'm broken."
Wow.
It's like her grief has shut down her ability to even express her emotions.
That's so powerful. And it connects back to this idea of emotional paralysis, right?
Yeah.
She's not just sad, she's completely shut down.
Exactly.
It's like she's lost her voice both literally and figuratively.
Exactly. And the film uses her physical paralysis as a way to visually represent that internal struggle.
Right.
As the drug wears off and she starts to regain movement,
Mm-hmm.
it's symbolic of her emotional healing as well.
Okay.
She's slowly rediscovering her voice, her strength, her will to live.
It makes you wonder if the filmmakers intentionally chose a paralytic agent as the plot device to make that connection between physical and emotional states. Yeah.
Adds like a whole other layer to the story.
It does. It's not just about the physical threat.
Right.
It's about how our internal struggles can sometimes feel just as paralyzing.
And then there's the setting, Big Sur.
Oh, yeah.
It's not just a pretty backdrop. It's almost like a character in itself.
Totally. The vastness of the landscape, the isolation of the woods, the relentless sound of the river.
Yeah.
It all creates this atmosphere of unease.
Uh-huh.
And it adds to Iris's sense of being trapped, both physically and emotionally.
It's like the setting is a mirror of her internal state.
Exactly.
And then there's that recurring image of the red toy boat.
Oh, right. The boat.
Yeah, which belonged to her son.
It's such a potent symbol.
It's haunting, isn't it? It represents her grief, her attachment to her son, her inability to let go of the past. But it's also a toy.
Right.
Something associated with childhood and innocence.
That's a great observation.
Right.
The red boat becomes this multi-layered symbol.
Yeah.
It's both a reminder of her loss and a symbol of the love she had for her son.
It's like she's clinging to it for dear life, afraid to let go of the past, even though it's causing her so much pain.
And what's interesting is that it's only when she starts to fight back, to embrace her own survival, that she's separated from the boat.
Right.
It's almost like letting go of that physical object allows her to start letting go of her grief and embrace the possibility of a future.
It's a powerful turning point in the film.
It is.
It suggests that in order to heal and move forward, we sometimes have to release our grip on the past, however painful that may be.
That's true.
And it connects to the film's overall message of resilience.
Okay.
That even in the face of unimaginable trauma, the human spirit can find a way to endure and even grow stronger.
Okay, so we've got Iris, who goes on this incredible journey of transformation, confronting her grief and finding her inner strength.
Right.
But then there's Richard,
Yeah.
and this is where things get really unsettling. The film never gives us a clear answer as to why he does what he does.
That ambiguity is one of the film's most intriguing aspects.
Yeah, I agree.
We get glimpses into his past, his claims of finding clarity in death, his disturbing sense of connection with his victims,
Right.
but it's never fully explained. And I think that's what makes him so terrifying.
It's like he represents this primal darkness that exists in the world,
Yeah.
something we can't fully comprehend or control. And it makes you question, like, is evil something people are born with? Or is it something that develops over time? Is it nature or nurture?
Right. And the film doesn't offer any easy answers.
It doesn't.
It forces us to confront the complexity of human nature
Yeah.
and the possibility that darkness can exist even in seemingly ordinary people.
That's a scary thought.
It is. It challenges us to think about the forces that shape us,
Mm-hmm.
the choices we make, and the potential for both good and evil that resides within us all.
It's a lot to process.
Yeah.
And it brings us back to that central question is, don't move, more than just a thriller.
Right.
Can a film that's predictable in some ways still be profound?
I think the answer is yes.
Yeah.
While the film relies on some familiar thriller tropes,
Yeah.
it uses them to explore deeper themes of grief resilience and the nature of evil.
Mm-hmm.
It's a film that stays with you long after the credits roll,
Yeah, it does.
prompting you to ask questions about yourself, the world, and the delicate balance between light and darkness that exists within us all.
And speaking of lingering questions, there's one scene at the very end that I haven't been able to stop thinking about.
Oh yeah, which one?
After everything she's been through, Iris survives,
Right.
and Richard is left severely injured.
Yeah.
Her final words to him are, "Thank you." What do you make of that?
That ending is brilliant in its ambiguity.
It is.
It's such a chilling echo of what Richard said to his dying girlfriend, suggesting that maybe Iris has reached a similar understanding of life and death.
Wow.
But on another level, it could be interpreted as genuine gratitude.
Gratitude. But he terrorized her.
I know it sounds crazy. But remember, Iris was suicidal at the beginning of the film. In a twisted way, it was Richard who jolted her back into a desire for survival.
So you're saying she's thanking him for giving her a reason to fight?
Exactly.
For forcing her to confront her grief and reclaim her own life.
It's a complex and unsettling conclusion.
It is.
That speaks to the film's themes of duality and transformation.
Right.
Even the most traumatic experiences can have unexpected consequences.
Yeah.
Leading to both darkness and light, pain and growth.
That's deep.
And it leaves us, the viewers, grappling with those unsettling questions long after the movie ends.
This deep dive has definitely given me a whole new perspective on Don't Move.
Good.
But before we move on to the final part of our discussion, I want to circle back to something we touched on earlier, the paralytic agent itself. So we talk about how the movie doesn't really give us a clear explanation, scientifically for how this drug works.
Yeah.
But it made me wonder, is there anything even remotely similar, like in the real world?
It's definitely a question that gets you thinking. And while a drug that induces such specific temporary paralysis but keeps the victim totally conscious,
right,
might seem like pure science fiction.
Right.
There are some interesting real-world parallels.
Oh, okay. So tell me more.
Well, in the medical world, there are paralytic agents that are used during surgeries and certain medical procedures.
Okay.
These drugs basically block the transmission of nerve impulses to the muscles, essentially causing temporary paralysis.
So that part of it is at least grounded in reality.
Exactly. But the key difference is that these medical paralytics, they also often induce unconsciousness.
Okay.
They're used in conjunction with anesthesia.
Right.
So the patient isn't aware of what's happening.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
I mean, imagine being awake and aware during surgery, but unable to move or speak. Yeah. That would be terrifying.
Absolutely. And that's what makes the premise of Don't Move so chilling.
Yeah.
It takes this medical concept and twists it into this nightmare scenario.
Right.
The idea that someone could be fully conscious and aware of their surroundings, but completely helpless, unable to move or call for help, is truly unsettling.
It taps into a primal fear, doesn't it? The fear of being trapped and vulnerable. And it makes you question just how much control we really have over our own bodies.
Exactly. And it brings us back to that final thought from the outline.
Okay.
Imagine for a moment that you're in Iris's position.
Wow. Okay.
You're fully paralyzed, facing a determined killer, and you have no way to call for help. What would you do?
No, that's a thought experiment.
It is, right? It makes you realize just how vulnerable she was.
So how would you approach the situation?
Right. Would you try to reason with Richard? Would you play dead? Would you try to find a way to signal for help, even if it seemed impossible?
I think my first instinct would be to try and understand him.
Okay.
Maybe appeal to his humanity, but then again, we saw how that worked out for his other victims.
It's a tough call, isn't it? Because on one hand, he seems to genuinely believe that he's doing something righteous.
Right.
But on the other hand, he's clearly a dangerous psychopath.
It's like that classic dilemma. Do you try to fight a predator or do you try to outsmart them? And in this case, you're literally stripped of your ability to fight back physically.
Right. So it becomes a battle of wits.
Yeah.
And it makes you appreciate Iris's resourcefulness even more.
Yeah.
She uses whatever she can, her environment, her limited movements, even her own vulnerability, to try and escape.
I guess that's what true resilience looks like. Finding a way to survive even when the odds are stacked against you. And it makes you think about what resources we all have within ourselves that we might not even realize are there until we're pushed to our limits.
Exactly. Don't Move might be a fictional story, but it raises real questions about human nature survival and the power of the human will.
It does.
And it reminds us that even in the darkest of times, there's always a glimmer of hope, a spark of resilience that can help us find a way through.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, I'm left with this lingering sense of unease, but also a feeling of empowerment.
Interesting.
It's like the movie is a reminder that life can throw some pretty messed up curveballs.
It can.
But it's up to us to find a way to navigate them, to tap into our inner strength and keep moving forward.
Beautifully said. And maybe that's the ultimate takeaway from Don't Move.
Yeah.
It's not just about the thrills and chills.
Right.
It's about recognizing the strengths that lies within each of us. The ability to overcome challenges and emerge even stronger on the other side.
So next time you're feeling stuck or overwhelmed, remember Iris.
Good advice.
Who knows, you might surprise yourself with what you're capable of.
And with that, we've reached the end of our deep dive into Don't Move.
Well, this was great. Thanks for joining me.
A pleasure.
We hope this exploration has sparked some thought-provoking conversations and maybe even inspired you to take a closer look at the world around you, both the light and the shadows. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and never stop diving deep